Hello everybody, thanks for checking out today's video. I get to fly a Dominator in this video. This Dominator was supplied by John of Remote Alaska Missions. He's doing some pretty amazing work up in Alaska. I've linked his channel here. I would just like to say a few words before we start the video though. I am flying a Dominator, and if you've been in the sport long enough, you know what that implies. The Dominator has a interesting reputation, especially concerning the people and the company or companies. I think it's just one company that sells it. I am not interested, and I will not be entertaining a bunch of comments regarding this. I'm reviewing the wing. I'm not interested in seeing, reading, or replying to comments regarding the persons or companies that sell this wing or supply this wing. So today we are just looking at the wing. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and see what it's all about. Okay, so here we go, ready to take off. I'm flying my Gravity Defiant, same motor I've flown on all my other reviews. I found the wing took quite some time to get off the ground initially, and then was not very stable or happy once overhead, so I got on power very quickly to make sure that the inflation stuck, as it were, and I got off the ground. One of the first things I noticed was I do not like these brake stows. There's really no clear indication of where those little magnets are, and they are small magnets, maybe quarter, maybe a third of an inch round. Maneuverability wise, it turns pretty well actually. Looking from the chase cam view here, you can see it's a fairly tall wing, but it handles, it's pretty zippy. Now the takeoff and most of the flying was done trimmed out as advised by John, so I'm trimmed out almost this entire flight. You can see me here applying speed bar. I found the speed bar pressure to be very stiff, but very similar to the Mojo. The speed bar itself doesn't actually gain much speed. It's maybe 1 or 2 miles an hour. It did increase the sink rate quite a bit, but it didn't really net any additional gains when it comes to forward velocity. I'm trying it to catch up with John, who's flying a 24-meter Gin Vantage 3, and this Dominator is a size small, which is a 23-meter, and I'm really not catching up with him. Here you can see I'm not quite sure how to steer. It's not a reflex glider, so I think I could have used brakes, but I don't think I've ever gotten in trouble for using rear riser steering while on bar, so that's what I'm going for. Coming off of bar lets me use those brakes again. Trying it out trimmed in, just to see if the handling is any different. I did notice a decrease in speed, but I also noticed an interesting tendency to be slightly less stable in yaw, of all things, and also a little less stable in pitch. You can see as I come around here, it really shakes around. It twists on me. It was really bizarre. I've never had a wing do that to me before. Now, handling trimmed in was fairly similar to handling trimmed out. I will give the Dominator some credit for that. The handling didn't deteriorate significantly when changing between trim positions. I found on my Mojo, trimmed out, it handles much better than trimmed in, but the Dominator was close to the same in both respects. So according to John, landing should be done trimmed in, which I did. The trimmed in position, at least on my face, felt like maybe a 3 to 4 mile an hour decrease in forward speed. Unfortunately, I didn't check my GPS in this stage of flight to verify that, but it was a decrease in speed. The small correcting turns here felt controlled and not overly bobby of any kind. And here we go for the flare. The flare was actually a little better than I thought. Now, once the wing flared and I was on the ground, it quickly fell apart behind me. But progressing into the flare, surprisingly, was fairly linear. I wasn't too shocked by that.
Very strange flying experience, but I thank you for it anyways.
Here we go a little later for take 2. And once again, once I get the wing overhead, I notice that it's really not locked in like I'm used to, so I roll into the power pretty quick to get off the ground. It just seems to sway in pitch and roll when initially inflating, and again, this inflation has to be done trimmed out on advice of John, who's been flying the wing for 30 hours. We're doing a really short cross-country flight before the sun sets over here to the lake. I am quite happy with the lack of oscillation. It seems like a pretty stable wing. It's not rocking around. Get some good pictures. Now, flying straight, of course, I have to maintain some left brake pressure and left weight shift. But overall, it seemed to be pretty happy flying in a straight line. It's a nice sunset, and that's a nice picture, but I make the call to turn back. It's just getting a little too cold. Here we are again, testing out maneuverability. This is still trimmed out. You can see on the rear riser there, it's the Malian is a little higher than the B or A riser. One thing I do really like is the fact that they put this, I guess it's probably some kind of PVC tubing over their trim tabs, or their trim pull tabs, so that when you go to pull trims, it's quite easy to fit your fingers in it. It's not a soft loop, it's a semi-firm loop. It's kind of like an ozone brake handle. In a spiral, it doesn't really have a tendency to pitch down, so I'm pretty happy with that. Just bleeding off some altitude for the landing here. Trimming in. The trims were fairly stiff, so the rear risers definitely are pulling some weight. And once again, when I flare and actually hit the ground, the wing just falls apart immediately. It does not seem to want to kite.
Oh, man.
Yep, there it goes. I really don't have a chance to outrun my camera because the wing just stays right with me and then falls apart immediately afterwards. So the Dominator. It's an interesting wing, and I'm grateful that I got to fly it because it has a interesting reputation. But again, separating the art from the artist, just focusing on the wing itself, here's what I thought about it. The inflation was bad. It does not have a good inflation. Any inflation that you need to be trimmed out to successfully get off the ground is not a good inflation in my book. And it didn't feel stable in that inflation. It was pretty spotty on whether or not it was locked in. left, right, forward, or backward, requiring you to go on the power. In that vein, I do have mad respect for people who normally fly this wing. It's not easy to get off the ground. So if you're flying this wing normally, you've got some skill. I'll give you that. The flight was actually not bad. So trimmed out or in, maneuverability was about the same, and it didn't oscillate. On bar, off bar, trimmed in, trimmed out. I really appreciated that. It's a fairly stable wing in flight. Until you go through turbulence, and then it doesn't inspire confidence. When I intentionally did spirals flying through my own prop wake and wing wake, I got yaw oscillations. The wing rocked around, so it twisted left and right as well as pitched forward and backward. And I've never felt that on another wing before, and it really kind of threw me off. Bizarre, really, truly. It does not inspire confidence in me with the other wings that I've flown, and I think that's the big takeaway here. The flare was mediocre, I'll dismiss it, but at the end of the day, this is a 4-line glider with 2 cascades. Which causes a lot of drag. The materials seem very, very dated. The risers are very soft and wide, but not very thick. It feels a lot like the free X-Wing that I used to kite while running a drone into it. You can check that video out here. It's kind of an interesting one. But that wing was 12 years old. So it flies, but it's definitely an old design. If you've flown a Dominator before, I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments, especially if you've flown something other than a Dominator, as well as the Dominator, of course, to compare with. Check my notes. Otherwise, thanks for checking it out. You can hit the like, subscribe, all that normal YouTube jazz. Yeah, the Dominator. I don't know. It couldn't keep up with a larger wing with a lighter load without the use of speed bar, and even with speed bar it was not very much faster. Oh well, thank you John for letting me fly this thing. Check him out, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.